It's hard to believe this, but tomorrow it will be 25 years since the infamous Robert Fisher case unfolded here in Arizona, April 10th, 2001, when Robert Fisher's family was found dead in a house explosion, and Robert Fisher, the suspect in this case, was never seen again. You can see footage here back when it happened. I'm going to take you through the crime itself, where the case stands now, and then we got a letter or a statement from Robert Fisher's sister, who I've stayed in touch with for many years now, about her reflections on this 25th anniversary, and we have a former lead detective standing by that we've worked with for a long time to do a live interview about this too. Robert Fisher is an American fugitive who is wanted for the April 10th, 2001 explosion of his home that killed his family there, and was part of his elaborate plan of these 3 murders, an escape, and then he was never seen again. That's Mary Fisher, his wife. He had his daughter, Britney, and his son, Bobby. They were 12 and 10 years old. Now, at first, when this happened, people just believed that there was a gas leak, that the house went up in flames. They called 911, dozens of calls to 911 in Scottsdale that early morning. And people immediately, when investigators got to the scene, were saying, oh my God, there's a family in there, there's a family in there. Well, when investigators got inside, they did find 3 bodies. But they thought it was weird off the bat because the 3 bodies were all in their beds. And typically when you have a house fire or something like this, if somebody dies in a fire or explosion, they're trying to get out of the house, and they are found trying to get out of the house. So pretty quickly, Scottsdale police gets involved, and they realize that they have a homicide on their hands. Mary Fisher was found with her throat slit and a gunshot to the back of her head. Britney and Bobby both had their throats slit in their beds. They were nearly decapitated. Robert Fisher was nowhere to be found. They started investigating, where is Robert? Turns out he didn't show up for his shift at work as a respiratory therapist at the Mayo Clinic that morning. And as they keep investigating, they realize that there are pictures from the ATM down the road the night before that show Robert Fisher and his wife, Mary's 4Runner, getting $280 out of the ATM. And those are the last known pictures of Robert Fisher to this very day. They don't know why $280 were taken out. They don't know where that was spent. But they believe now that Robert Fisher killed his family that night, cut a gas line, lit a candle, escaped, and then waited for that house to blow up. So he really had about 8 to 10 hours on authorities before this all unfolded the way that it did. So there's this all-out search for Robert Fisher. And he was this guy that liked to camp, kind of an outdoorsy man. And some friends and other people that knew Robert knew that he liked to camp in the Young, Arizona area. That's a really small, wooded area in town that's north of Phoenix. So when authorities start searching up there, sure enough, they find the 4Runner, his wife's 4Runner that he had taken, and his dog, Blue, alive. But there's no sign of Robert Fisher anywhere. And they're thinking that he's got to be in the area, possibly hiding in some of the caves nearby, that he couldn't have made it far if he didn't have his car and his dog was still alive. But there were still no signs of Robert Fisher, and there still haven't been to this day. Now, this story, this case, has captivated the country for a long time because there's been all these different alleged sightings of Robert Fisher all over the world. Some of them have been credible tips that have been investigated through. Some of them were never corroborated. Many people feel differently on whether or not they believe Robert Fisher is alive and how he could possibly get away with a crime like this. And they were, this well-known church family. I mean, Britney and Bobby were so beloved at their schools. They were very involved in activities. And so this really rocked people who knew them, families that still live in the Scottsdale area. But another family that was involved and affected by this was Robert Fisher's own family. They've been pretty quiet, and as you can imagine, they've gotten many hateful messages over the years. People believe they knew that Robert was a killer, maybe they knew more, things like that. I have stayed in contact with Robert's sister, Jean, for many years now, probably 7 years. And we've talked throughout the years. Part of that's because we did a 2022 documentary on this case. It was the first true crime documentary I'd ever done. But I had also just covered this so long ago, so much so that actually starting in the true crime genre was when I did a special 5-6 minute piece on this case back in 2019. So I've stayed in contact with them, and I want to share something that Jean shared with me last night. I asked her if she'd want to share a statement or some words reflecting on the 25th anniversary. And stick with me here because it is a little bit long, but I think it's important to know where the Fisher family stands a quarter of a century later after what police believe Robert did. This is from Robert Fisher's sister, Jean. Quote, 25 years seems like an eternity, but also like yesterday. We still do not know anything more than we did in April of 2001. I still hold on to the same hope that I had for 25 years, that Robert did not do this horrendous act. How could the brother that I loved so deeply and that loved his children so deeply take their lives? Britney and Bobby were so very young and had their whole lives to live. If he did this, he was not the person I thought he was. Whoever did this not only ended 3 precious lives, but hurt and damaged so many of our lives. Pain does not describe the torment our families have lived through. There is no word that can describe it. But through all the years, the Lord has given us grace to survive and prosper. Grace to learn how to forgive. Forgive Robert. Mom is 90 now and living with dementia. Thankful she won't remember what day the 10th represents anymore. Why couldn't Robert reach out to me? That question has haunted me for years. If any good can come out of this tragedy, maybe someone needs to hear that. Reach out to your family or friends when you think you are alone, when you think no one cares. Reach out to your family or friends. There's someone that cares, someone who loves you, that can help you. Reach out before it's too late. I thought that was pretty interesting. Something that Jean had shared with me many years ago was that she still wasn't sure if Robert Fisher was the one who did this. And it could be something that's denial, but for them, they just never got more answers and instead have kind of lived this life where people have suspected them for so many years, which is tough. And that's something that really not a lot of people can relate to. I want to bring in former lead detective in the case, TJ Jiran. TJ was part of our documentary with us in 2022. TJ, I'm so happy to have you on the show. I'm curious what you think of Jean's words this many years later.
It's Robert's sister, so if that's her belief system, I'm not going to question it. I mean, as an investigator working that case, we looked at the evidence, circumstances behind it, and we believe Robert Fisher is the one that committed this atrocious crime. And just to correct you, Brianna, I wasn't the lead detective on it. I was like the
co-lead detective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I was like second on it. God rest John Kirkham. It was his case from the start. But we all equally worked it hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that week we went maybe 3 days without sleep. So it was a rough case. I mean, John Kirkham and I were the first ones at the scene that walked around the back of the house and observed what you described. And we knew right away, just like you said, with the body still laying in the beds, we knew, okay, this is a problem. This is probably a homicide. We were pretty certain of it at that time. And then I went to where Robert was working at the Mayo on 56th Street. I think I spent 2 or 3 days out there interviewing everybody he knew, served a search warrant on his locker. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah. I know when you guys found the Forerunner up there, I mean, it seemed the thought at that time was, we're probably going to find him. If we've got the car and we got the dog, he's got to be in this area. And I know one thing that we did in the documentary, and you came up there with us, was we went spelunking in the caves that are up there. People thought that Robert could survive. You can see footage here of it back when we went like 4 years ago. And people thought Robert could survive there for a while. Those have been pretty searched. At this point, I mean, do you believe he is in the caves nearby? Where do you believe he went?
No, he's not in the caves. So his truck was found on April 20th, approximately 10 days later. What's interesting is when I got back to town, after we were up there for 3 or 4 days doing the search, I received a phone call. And I think I told you about this, where a woman called and said, hey, my husband and I, we were driving south down road, and there was a man walking by, and he walked right by because Young Road it's not a wide, it's a forest road.
Right.
It's got some places have the cliffs on it, and when they drove by this man, he was on the outside near the edge of the drop off, and she and her husband believed that was Robert Fisher. I can't remember exactly how many days before that was when he found the truck. So my personal belief is he walked out. He possibly had help. There's always that possibility. Always. I personally, it's 50-50, but I mean that he's still alive.
And if he is alive, I mean, where do you think he is? And how could he live and not be found after all these years?
Well, I think I've told you this before. He's the John List of our generation. John List went 20, 25 years before he was finally caught. And he was caught off of America's Most Wanted. There's somebody out there that might see this program. They've probably seen you die. You've done a lot of work on this. I still believe that there's somebody out there, and he could be in a new relationship. And it's the old adage of when they see it, they'll look over and they'll think, kind of looks like Henry. No, that's not my Henry. So it's a possibility, and he knew the Southwest very well. So my belief is he's possibly still in the States somewhere. But I believe he's still alive.
Now, still alive, do you think that means the case will be solved? Or you think he's alive and he will get away with this for life?
Well, there's no guarantees in life, man, except death and taxes. So I can't say it's going to be solved tomorrow. It could be solved in 10 years, or it might never be solved. It's a cold case. And as you know, I just recently went back as a civilian investigator for the violent crimes unit at Scottsdale. And, I still did work on it then. I took calls coming in all the time. The administrator of the Family Advocacy Center would feed me the leads coming in because I wanted it. I wanted to talk to people. And a couple of good leads came through. Did it pan out? I don't know yet.
Yeah. Well, and so you actually make a really good point on this. Probably in my entire career here in Arizona, this case is the one that I still get tips the most of out of any case that I've ever covered. People are fascinated and passionate about sending in tips in this case. When we did the documentary, I want to show some video because there was 2 tips that we kind of looked at that were these lookalikes that people thought really could have been them. One of them was from Canada. That people really thought was Robert Fisher. Here you can see him on the screen. This guy,
that was right after I retired.
Yeah, right. But I mean, this was like he had the same kind of back scar, missing tooth that Robert had. People really thought that this was him. Eventually, the fingerprints, though, ruled him out. But I mean, you can see the resemblance. And then even more so, I think, is this look like from Mexico. This guy right here. I mean, this looks a lot like the guy there. It's that specific picture of Robert Fisher that we've had, that family picture, compared to this guy. I mean, you could definitely see it there. And they eventually found this man too down in Mexico and confirmed that it wasn't Robert. But those were decent tips. I think something that, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but something that you guys struggle with tips now is people will be like, oh my God, he could have been this guy that walked into this Target in 2015 that kind of looked like him. And it's like, well, how do you track down something from a long time ago where you don't know where that person is? You guys need tips and leads coming in where people are like, hey, here's where you can find this person who I believe might be him, right?
Right. Like 6 months ago, before I retired again, I had a lead out of Michigan, female. Waitress for Buffalo Wings called up and gave us a tip. And so they're coming in constantly. I had a tip come out of Washington. Now, she had pictures of this person, And as soon as I saw the photographs, I was like, no, it's not him. I had a tip in New Mexico. So a tip in Colorado. They're constantly coming in, but they can't be ignored.
Right. Do you think it's one of those like ancestry.com or DNA things that will eventually, if he is alive, lead to him?
Well, there's a couple of factors to that. So let's say he is the John List of our generation. Let's say within the last 25 years, let's say it's 5 years, 7 years after he leaves Arizona, disappears, and gets in another relationship. And let's say he has children again. I've often thought of genealogy. Now, he would have to have a son. He would have to have a son if the person he had the child with is already in a database to where you can match up. But he has to have a son. So I've often thought of that.
That makes sense.
I mean,
if he has a family.
A lot of guys looked at me and said, "You're reaching," but it's like, no, this is something. I mean, like you have reported on this. I have skin in the game. I was there day one. So for me, and like people calling you saying, talking about Robert Fisher, I go to a party and I meet somebody from Scottsdale Police. Did you work at Robert Fisher Police? So you're right. It has sparked interest in the state.
Yeah. Well, TJ, thanks for joining the show.
Sure.
I know it's been, so long, over 2 decades of this, and I know you're super passionate about it, and I appreciate getting to work with you on it. Obviously, we hope that there's answers, but I so appreciate you coming on the show and always enjoy talking to you. So thank you so much.
Take care, Brianna.
All right, you too, TJ. Talk to you soon. All right, a lot of people obviously know the Robert Fisher case, still invested. That's where it stands today. Again, thank you to TJ for coming on and sharing his perspective, and also to Robert Fisher's sister, Jean, for sharing the words about her reflections so many years later. Obviously, we hope to have answers one way or another in this case eventually.